cover-ups, lies, and in between, conspiracies, and those who dare to speak the truth. Get ready for a walk on the wild side. Welcome to Parley with your host, Michael Gray.
Hi all, this is Mike Gray, and we're another episode of Parley here. We have a really good guest, John Potasch. John, you there?
Yeah, I am. Thanks for having me
Hey,
on.
John, how you doing?
Good, thanks.
Hey, John, I want to thank you for coming on the show.
Sure.
Let's get into it. We'll talk about your new book, Weapons Against Us.
It's Drugs as Weapons Against Us. The CIA's
Drugs as
murders
Weapons Against
targeting
Us.
of right.
Okay.
And I'll tell you the subtitle when you're ready.
The subtitle?
Yeah, the subtitle just explains a little more of what it's about. The CIA's murders targeting of SDS, Panthers, Hendricks, Lenin, Cobain, Tupac, and other activists.
Wow. You think they got all of them, huh?
I do, yeah.
Okay.
And I've got 1,600 endnotes just documenting my sources for the information. I started researching it about 25 years ago.
Let me ask you, do they have some kind of weird rule where they do it on certain, like birthdays, like 27? Like there seems to be like they die at 33 or 27. Like Jimi Hendrix was 33 and John Belushi 33. 30.
Well, I think Jimi Hendrix was actually. I think he was younger than that, but I could be wrong. I thought he was 27, but I can't remember.
Okay, yeah, like either 27 or 33 seems to be that an age where these people die or are killed.
Yeah, a number of musicians did die at 27. I don't know if that was purposeful for any reason, but Tupac Shakur, they attempted. There's evidence of attempts on his life starting when he was as early as 21, but the final attempt obviously worked when he turned 25. A few months after he turned 25. So there could be. I mean, I know they do use what I call anniversary timing tactics in some of their assassinations. At least there's, seems to go beyond coincidence. Probably the best researcher when MLK first pointed that out about Martha King's assassination, when the exact year anniversary of his official announcement of being against the Vietnam War, exactly 1 year later he was assassinated.
Right.
And Pepper, who's an attorney who's lectured at Oxford University, said that he doesn't think this was a coincidence. He thinks they did this on purpose.
So they have this weird rule where they like to do things on like 1 year to the day.
Yeah, I don't think it's a rule. I think it's a psychological kind of tactic where they give a subconscious understanding that if you do this is what's going to happen. By doing it on the anniversary of the day you did something that they're against. Everyone was against King coming out against the Vietnam War, everyone being the conservative element who was trying to keep America supporting the Vietnam War. So when MLK came out officially against the Vietnam War in a speech at Riverside Church, that was going against, the grain, believe it or not, in 1967. And exactly 1 year later, of course, he was assassinated. Now, with another major assassination, there was a huge operation to kill Patrice Lumumba in the Congo, and that was in 1961, I believe. And the CIA was involved in that. They probably got help from Belgium, because Belgium was the first one to colonize the Congo. But so I have CIA documents in my book about Patrice Lumumba, because the head of MK Ultra, Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, went over to the Congo with a secret element, like a chemical in toothpaste to aid that assassination. I have the documents about that reprinted in the book. But so it was exactly 40 years later, on the anniversary of his assassination, one of Lumumba's comrades in that situation, and in him becoming the first black independence leader of the Congo, was then assassinated. So I show other examples too, but so I think this is not just a random rule. It's a psychological tactic.
Wow. Okay. And of course, the people behind that are Zabriskie and Kissinger, and
no. Well, I think they collaborate with the oligarchy for sure.
Right.
I can't say you can just point to two particular people, but I agree that they're
who gives
the
I mean
neocon element that are involved with this oligarchy,
right?
This conservative oligarchy that are imperialists that collaborate with the British ruling class, that have been probably the largest, the most powerful people in the world for the last
now let me ask you. I've heard that the CIA is kind of like the Rockefeller. Maybe the Rockefellers' personal Pinkertons. That the Rockefellers.
Well, I think the Rockefellers. Yeah, I think the Rockefellers are one of the biggest founders and collaborating families with the CIA. It's you can go to the Rockefellers, the Carnegies, the J.P. Morgans. The Bushes are a little actually lower on the totem pole from them, but they're in line with them. The Harrimans, that group that were the wealthiest families in the country. In the early 1900s, they started the eugenics movement, and the eugenics movement was a genocidal movement in our country to sterilize as many minority as huge percentages of the minority populations in our country, and they passed eugenics laws in somewhere between 25 and 29 states in the country. And they were saying that all these different minority groups, even Irish and Italians, had huge percentages, maybe 40 to 60% of them were inferior and should be sterilized, if not gotten rid of. And of course, people of color were inferior and should be gotten rid of, according to these eugenics commission reports. And it was an incredible movement.
How did they get away with, a lot of people don't realize, how did they get away with, okay, they passed those laws, but how did they enforce it?
Well, they actually sterilized loads of women when they were either giving birth. They sterilized them afterwards. They actually killed loads of babies. There was a film about a particular doctor in Chicago who they called the Black Stork. The film was called The Black Stork, and it was an incredibly popular film. I mean, not popular because it was so horrific, but popular because they pushed it so hard that people actually agreed with it, believe it or not. And so, what they were doing at all these public hospitals were they were killing babies, they were sterilizing women, and this is what they were doing, and under this rubric of paying all these professors at top universities to agree with them. Now, of course, they also had bought out a lot of newspapers to get them, in agreement, and there were notable journalists that disagreed with them, like Baltimore's H.L. Mencken, I'm happy to say, made fun of this whole movement, and some other newspapers made fun of this movement, particularly actually San Francisco's Hearst newspaper, hugely railed against this movement. And the way you can find out about this movement is Los Angeles Times syndicated columnist Edwin Black's book, The War Against the Weak. It's incredibly meticulously documented. It's been translated into loads of languages around the world, and he's more famous for his book, IBM and the Holocaust, about how IBM put out the punch cards, the Howard's punch cards, to fuel the tattoos on people's arms, and to help the Nazis do what they did in a much more expeditious manner. But War Against the Weak goes into the whole eugenics movement and how it led up to these same families funding the Nazis to help them rise, to the top in Germany, in a country that really didn't want them, to rise to the top, but they were so devastated by World War I that, when you put tons of money into a group like that, and Brown Brothers Harriman was a huge funder. That was the Harriman family, and of course Bush, it was Prescott Bush, I think, was head of that group. So, Harriman actually was the owner, and Prescott was made, I think, president of it or something. But anyway, so if you look at his books, they're amazing, alternative histories of what was happening in our country and up to Nazi Germany.
Right, yeah. And
the
Brown brother.
Show,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
go on.
Well, I was just going to say that. Go ahead.
You can go on. I was going to say I was going to show what I show is, I'm sorry, there's a little delay in our talk, but
okay.
What I show is the fact that the eugenics movement relates to my book because of the fact I just get into it in the first chapter, but the same offices at Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory were then used for MK Ultra, the CIA's MK Ultra program, and that program was the use of drugs as weapons against us. The CIA's use of drugs against both foreign opposition and domestic opposition, meaning civil rights leaders, meaning anti-war leaders, etc. And they particularly targeted musicians because musicians could promote the drugs that they wanted the populace to start using, and that's what the CIA does. I mean, national security documents say that what they want to do is to get us doing what we think is in our own best interest, but is really in the CIA's interest. And part of the way they do that is just like you get LeBron James to wear Nike shoes, and it makes you think that you want Nike shoes. You get these musicians doing things, and you love these musicians, and you want to be like them, so you start doing them. And that's how they sold all these drugs to the masses, to us.
Just for, like Margaret Singer, who didn't she start Planned Parenthood?
She did.
Yeah, and there are letters of her praising Hitler. Her and Hitler were actually corresponding before World War II.
Yeah, it's really sad. I mean, it's really ugly and sad. But I mean, I happen to be pro-abortion rights. But yeah, Planned Parenthood did have an ugly start, and I hope it's changed. I assume it's changed. I hope it's changed. I don't know. But yeah, Sanger had a very ugly start with the eugenics movement, and it's too bad. But if there is still ugly things going on in Planned Parenthood, I hope there's a lot of abortion rights centers that are doing better work, and so.
Yeah. The only thing about I agree that abortion should be legal, but I would prefer to see it done in a hospital rather than these. A lot of these clinics are dirty.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, so
like it be done in safe places and
yeah, exactly. Yeah, safe and clean. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
But okay. What about the? You're saying that Tupac and Kurt? Why would they kill Kurt Cobain? What was he? What did he do to get out of line?
Yeah, the situation with a lot of these musicians is they used them in several ways. Well, one of the ways that they targeted these musicians with drugs is the fact that if these musicians were activists in any way, they targeted them with drugs in order to kind of take down their competency or to hurt their activism, hurt their abilities, and to manipulate them easier. And so some of the U.S. intelligence documents showed how LSD makes people more easily manipulative. Make it easier for agents to manipulate these musicians and make people in general, more easy to manipulate when they've eaten a lot of LSD. And so I show how this became the case with some of these musicians like John Lennon, how they did try to steer him in certain ways. Now, he was dosed. His first hit of acid came from, believe it or not, George Harrison's dentist, according to two eyewitnesses. John Lennon's wife and his first wife and George Harrison's girlfriend at the time, Patty Boyd. Patty Boyd gives the most detailed account. Told how they were just going over to have dinner with George Harrison's dentist. They were young. This was 1965, and in England. And at the end of the dinner, they said, "Oh, you got to stay for dessert and coffee. We got this great dessert, and they're like, no, I'm sorry, we have to leave for friends going on for the first time in London. And so they said, oh no, but please, you gotta stay for this coffee. So they stayed for the dessert and coffee, and then the dentist says to him, oh, well, you can't drive yourself because you've had acid, you've had LSD. And John Lennon screamed, what? And George Harrison said, what's LSD? He didn't even know what it was at the time because it wasn't popular in Britain in 1965. And
wow, could you imagine they dosed them without even telling them?
Yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible to dose people that are so wealthy that they could sue you and try to press charges and put you in jail for something like this. And this guy, and the only reason I can see him doing something like this is if he thought he was above the law, because he should have been charged. He should have gone to jail, but obviously that didn't happen to him. And so this is just one example. Another good example is Mick Jagger's first hit of acid came from an undercover FBI agent who was working in London at the time, or in the in England, and befriended Keith Richards and others. According to Marianne Faithfull in the book Blown Away by it was Ernest Hemingway's former editor, A.E. Hotchner. He says that he interviewed Marianne Faithfull, who was dating Mick Jagger for a long time, and was at the scene of a party, and described the events leading up to this party, and saying that Mick Jagger actually was suing a newspaper for saying that Mick Jagger was involved in drug-fueled orgies, like acid-fueled, LSD-fueled orgies, saying he'd never done LSD before. He was the only Rolling Stone left that hadn't tried LSD in 1967. And at that party, here's this undercover agent with a briefcase full of drugs, including LSD, and he ends up getting everyone to use acid at this party. So Mick Jagger finally says, all right, I'll try my first hit of acid at this time. And so he tries it, and then the police come and arrest everybody, arrest Jagger for some ridiculous prescription drug he had on him, like something akin to speed or something that people were taking uppers those days to stay up for certain things, for writing or concerts, whatever it was. But it was prescription and it was actually legal, and the judge thought the case was pretty incredible, but still sentenced him. And so the point is, though, that an undercover agent dosed Mick Jagger for the first time. Mick Jagger at that time was him and Brian Jones, the founder of the Rolling Stones, were the most outspoken anti-war musicians in the Rolling Stones. And Mick Jagger had started attending anti-war rallies in Britain. He just was about to write, or had written Street Fighting Man and some other anti-war songs. It's just a shot away, or I forget the name of that song, but that's the chorus. And so, I think they targeted him because of his activism in that way, and trying to make him less competent. And then they framed him and tried to control him, legally that way. And Brian Jones was, as I say, was also targeted with drugs, and they framed him. They wouldn't allow him a visa, they took away. I think they either took away his passport or wouldn't allow him a visa to leave the country for the U.S. for the American tour, and so the Rolling Stones had to leave him behind for the American tour. He sobered up. Brian Jones sobered up a lot. He got rid of most drugs except occasional wine, and he ended up drowning in his own swimming pool. And
wait.
Book, yeah.
He started the Rolling Stones, right?
He did start the Rolling Stones, and he was considered the best musician in the Rolling Stones.
Right, yeah.
By far. Yeah, he was a multi-instrumentalist.
And he was pretty much murdered, right? I mean, there are witnesses that say two guys came out of the, one bald guy came out from behind the bushes and threw him in the pool and drowned them, right?
Well, what happened was, according to the witnesses in A.E. Hotchner's book, this is one of the witnesses is a member of the Guinness family, actually, that was friends with Brian Jones. He said him and a friend of his had gone into town for something, to help out with something, that a friend of Brian Jones that was coming into town to pick him up. He called back to Brian Jones' house to say, we couldn't find the guy we were supposed to pick up. and he heard a party in the background. This Guinness family member said, and he was wondering why it sounded like a party, because he had just left Brian Jones' house a while back, and there wasn't supposed to be a party there that night. And so he tries to go back to the house, and they can't get into the parking lot because it's blocked off by other cars. And so they go around to the back into the woods and look at the swimming pool, and they see a crowd around the swimming pool, and someone instructing people to jump in and hold this guy down in the water, and they see someone being drowned in the water. And all of a sudden, after they see someone being drowned, a stranger pops up and says, get out of here, or you'll be next, and identifies the Guinness family member by name. I forget his name off the top of my head. And so he said he was scared to death to write about it until a long time later, and the friend who was with him disappeared after that. So, these are just some of the accounts of how Brian Jones was murdered. And
holy cow!
Yeah. Yeah, it's really sad because.
Well, I mean, why did they want to murder him though? What was he not playing ball or? He
was seriously anti-war. He had also just contacted Jimi Hendrix and John Lennon, and when the Rolling Stones had to leave Brian Jones behind for the American tour, there was different legal issues involved and other things going on where they had to officially say, for at least the time being, they had to temporarily leave Brian Jones out of the Rolling Stones. So Brian Jones explored other, side projects or other groups. And so he called Jimi Hendrix, who he was friends with. He called John Lennon, who he was friends with, and he said, do you want to form a group? Because Lennon was out of the Beatles by that time. This was about 1968. And they had said yes, actually, by that time. And so that was going to be an incredible super group of 3 political musicians, because Hendrix already started getting political. He got political after MLK's assassination, and John Lennon was always political. And so that was a real threat right there.
Yeah. Yeah, they always shut up the ones who, like Lennon was notorious for mouthing off,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure.
And I never trusted Mick Jagger or I don't know about Keith Richards. He's kind of a wasteoid, but Mick Jagger's kind of a slimy guy,
Well, I think Mick Jagger was scared into submission. I think they did other things to him after that. There was Hell's Angel admitted in court that there was contracts. That the Hell's Angels were trying to kill Mick Jagger, and they had a excuse for why they were trying to kill him, but it was the same Hell's Angels group in Oakland that had what's that? They didn't admit it at Altamont. They acted like that was the reason they were trying to kill him, Jagger. But there was, the situation at Altamont was a very strange situation because of the fact that the black man who climbed up onto the stage with a gun in his hand, holding it in his hand as if to shoot it, was literally a few yards from Mick Jagger when that happened. And I don't know what all the details of that were in terms of, like, was that an automatic attempt to kill Jagger? It's not completely clear. But when somebody gets, steps up onto a stage with a gun in his hand within yards of you, you got to wonder if the guy is trying to kill you. And so I argue in my book that it's possible that the Hells Angels were, a huge group playing security at that show, were so messed up that one of them actually stepped out of line in grabbing that guy and stabbing him in the back and killing him. And because that same Hells Angel who killed him then got killed later with it's hard to explain, but some of the same amount of money in his pocket as Mick Jagger had paid out to that family in a lawsuit about that wrongful death. So then there were 2 attempts on Jagger's life after that.
You know who caught that murder on film at Altamont?
Yeah, I saw that, the Maisel brothers, sure.
No. George Lucas was the cameraman there.
Was he? Was he working with the Maisel brothers for that?
Well, I don't know about that, but he was the producer of the documentary Gimme Shelter, which is about what happened in Altamont. And he was the cameraman that caught that on film. And then in the documentary you see Mick Jagger watching the event. So he's watching himself on stage singing "Sympathy for the Devil" and watching the murder. And what they did was they played it back and forth. Like they'd slow it down, then reverse it.
That's what I have a link on in my book. Yeah.
Yeah, real weird, huh? It's almost like, was that a message to him? Like, look, this is what's going to happen to you if you don't.
It could be. I just don't know. I mean, I argue that it probably was because of the fact, I don't know, of course, but I argue that it could have been because of the fact that the Hells Angels then, one of the Hells Angels admitted in court that they did try to kill him 2 more times. They did try to kill Jagger 2 more times.
Yeah.
And so, now the importance of that is that those Oakland Hells Angels did have murder contracts through alcohol, tobacco, and firearms agents and FBI agents in the past. They had murder contracts on Cesar Chavez, the famous farm organizer, immigrant farm workers organizer, and against Eldridge Cleaver, the Minister of Information nationally for the Black Panther Party. So alcohol, tobacco, and firearms agents admitted this in court. Said in court that we gave murder contracts. We were working with the FBI, and we gave murder contracts to Oakland Hells Angels, Sonny Barger in particular, to murder these 2 people. And so and it was the same Oakland Hells Angels that were this running security at Altamont, and that one of who the Hells Angels stepped out in court and said that he went in the witness protection program, saying that different things about his Hells Angels, including the fact that we had, in court, he said that we tried to kill Mick Jagger twice. We were trying to do that. So, yeah.
Wow. What was the point? Okay, so Cobain, Lennon, Hendrix.
Yeah, Cobain was particularly activist. He was always, particularly left-wing minded and anti-capitalist, and he made a lot of statements to that effect. And so he was a little bit of a thorn, of course, in U.S. intelligence side.
Was Courtney Love his handler? And because people say that she contacted a drummer. A drummer came forward. He was in a band, I don't know, and said that she asked him to kill Kurt Cobain.
Yeah, well, her situation is very sensitive. What I'll say about her is I have it all in the book, but I wouldn't call her exactly a handler.
You're afraid to talk about her?
No, I say it in the book, so the book's out, so I'll talk about her. But the reason I say it's sensitive is because I don't know how much people are going to believe it. But her history, when you look at her history from various sources, including her biological father and even her biological mother, who's got her own problems, but her biological mother's memoir says that she thinks that Courtney was abused at one of her child care agencies that she was in as a young child, around the ages of 5 to 7 years old. Okay, in the memoir that's in there. Okay, her biological father told me in an interview, and says it in his book called Love Kills. He says that she wrote him a letter, and he reprinted that letter in the book when she was 14 years old. Now, the biological mother of Courtney Love was an adopted daughter of some super rich parents, okay, the Reese's, Jack Reese and his wife. They were heirs to the Bausch and Lomb fortune. They also had huge stock in gold mines. And Jack Reese had a drinking issue and sexually abused Linda Carroll, why she changed her name, I don't know. But she abused her as a little young girl, and that's in her memoir, Linda Carroll's memoir.
Wow.
Linda Carroll's, Courtney Love's biological mother. And so Linda Carroll's rich parents, when Linda Carroll kind of separated from her first husband, Hank Harrison, Courtney Love's father, when Courtney was about 2 or 3 years old. Maybe
Hey,
actually 3 or 4 years old it might have been.
Hey,
And
we're gonna have to take a quick. We're gonna have to take a quick break.
No
Is that all right?
Yeah,
Okay,
sure.
just hold on. You are listening to WCJV Digital Broadcasting, Youngstown, New York, CJ Mars Radio. I'm Mike Ray, your host. This is Parley. We'll be right back with our very special guest, John Potasch. Hold on. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
You are listening to WCJV Digital Broadcasting, Youngstown, New York.
Well, in any case, I got order from Mars this morning. Yes, this commercial we have to do completely naked.
Oh, we have to do it naked?
Yes, so, I'm already prepared if you are.
Sure. Can I wear my phony tatas?
If you want to wear your phony tatas, that's up to you. It's all good.
Now that would be hilarious, eh?
Yes, it would. It's a good thing we're not filming, right?
Yep.
Go ahead. Now, wait a minute. Bird, you go ahead and you tell what time we're on.
Why am I doing it?
Because it's like...
Because this isn't an answer.
All right. Mars said so.
Say go.
All right. In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good evening, peeps, and join us Saturday evening at 9 o'clock for the Two-Faced News, where we talk about everything and anything.
That's right. Everything and anything, whether it's relevant or not, we're there.
Right. So join us at CJ Mars Saturday night.
That's right. And now that we're done, can we put our clothes back on?
Yes, we can.
Oh, thank you so much. Have you got the tea water going yet?
Yes, I do.
Me too. Okay, let's have a cup of tea. We're done.
Okay, we are back. This is Parley. I'm your host, Mike Ray, with our very special guest, John Potasch. John, you there?
Yeah, thanks.
Hey, okay, yeah, we were talking about
Courtney Love's
Courtney Love's situation. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so Courtney Love's grandparents convinced her mother to divorce Hank Harrison, and then the grandparents paid off Hank Harrison's lawyer when there was a custody battle over the 3 or 4 year old Courtney Love. That custody battle lasted a while in court, but Hank Harrison proceeded to lose all custody and all visitation rights over Courtney Love. It went completely to her biological mother, Linda Carroll, and the Reese family. And remember, this was a grandfather who had already sexually abused Linda Carroll. So we don't know if he also sexually abused Courtney Love or not. But so he lost all touch with her. Courtney Love, Linda Carroll begins to then, in her own memoir, says she ended up in New Zealand and ended up leaving Courtney Love behind while she went with a new husband in New Zealand. She remarried a few times, actually. And so she leaves him behind. And so one of the strange aspects of Courtney Love's life is her godmother was a woman named Winblad, who was the wife of one of Cesar Chavez's top opponents, huge, super wealthy farm owner in California. The name was Del Winblad, actually. And so Hank Harrison had named the godfather Phil Lesh, bass player for the Grateful Dead, but Linda Carroll names this super wealthy conservative woman as the godmother for Courtney Love. So Courtney Love ends up in the hands of this Del Winblad woman, godmother, as the biological mother ends up in New Zealand. And so Courtney Love ends up she's going to psychotherapy as early as age 3 years old, according to Linda Carroll's own memoir and Courtney Love's own take on things and her own biographies, her own autobiography.
At 3 years old, I mean, what can a 3-year-old tell you?
3 years old. Yeah, exactly. It's incredibly young. I'm a counselor myself, and we usually don't see 3-year-olds. I've never seen a 3-year-old for counseling. It's really strange. But anyway, so by the time Courtney Love is 14 years old, she's in a juvenile detention facility, and she finds out where Hank Harrison is and writes him a letter to please get her out of there. And in that letter, she's describing all the different all the different drugs that were given to her over the years, including Tuinals and Secanols. And she also describes how her counselors had sexually abused her, and a partner of Linda Carroll's had sexually abused her. And so Hank Harrison said he wasn't sure what to believe or not, but one of those people that was a partner of Linda Carroll's was actually also her psychiatrist. Hank Harrison said, and that's particularly unbelievable. But for the fact that he says he can't deny its truth though either, because when he got her out of that juvenile detention facility. Hank Harrison happens to be a counselor for a living himself, and he's also a writer. He says she was very messed up when he got her out of there. He described all kinds of problems she had, and described what he thought was that she went through brainwashing. Now, he said he thought she went through brainwashing because the biological mother and the grandparents wanted to brainwash her to turn her against him, Hank Harrison. He says he didn't think of the idea that there was anything beyond that. But he says, she described what happened to her and how does she know these exotic drugs at such a young age. And so within a year or two, she is already she's already shooting up heroin. And he says she was a monster. He couldn't control her. He was so depressed when he lost custody of her. He said he went into a depression for years. So he was so glad to get that letter from and hear from her and to get her out of that juvenile detention facility. But what he found was a monster. He said she was, going using all kinds of drugs, shooting up in his house, leaving needles around places, and prostituting for a local madam. And he had found out that one of her clients was actually David Packard of Hewlett-Packard, who was a former Assistant Secretary of Defense. And which is an incredible thing. She's 16 years old. She's prostituting to a former Assistant Secretary of Defense in the San Francisco area. So in another biography, in several biographies of
when she was 15, didn't she go to Japan at 15?
At about 15 or 16, she was also prostituting in Asia. Yes, in Japan. Yeah, he says she was prostituting in Japan. She only admits to stripping in Japan and called herself part of the white slave trade, white sex trade in Japan, and which seems to describe both,
well, she had to have some kind of protection, though, right? I mean, at 15 to go off.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
It's an incredible thing. I don't know how a 15 or 16-year-old does this. I mean, it's unbelievable. And so, and then she even admits, prostituting in Taiwan while still a teenager in a popular biography by Melissa Rossi, I think her name is. I got in paperback about Courtney Love. So her teen years are just unbelievable, really unbelievable. And so her first husband, James Moreland, who was a punk DJ in L.A., said that he thought he was marrying a feminist, like a punk rock feminist. And it turns out he said he married a right-wing Phyllis Diller in Courtney Love. And he said that she told him that she was sleeping with generals in Alaska when she was still a teenager. And they told her that the wars were all good for us. And so he doesn't know anything about politics. And he just couldn't believe it because he was like a left-wing, punk rocker himself. And he said that she bullied him into submission and would actually have thugs beat him up if he didn't agree to do things she said before he finally, divorced her and got away from her. But it's really her life is unbelievable. And so she was already a hardcore heroin addict before she came into Kurt Cobain's life. Now, I argue that Kurt Cobain was psychologically profiled. Psychological profiling isn't just done on criminals, according to top activists. They've told me, top attorneys who research the way activists are targeted with counterintelligence program and all have told me that they psychologically profile activists and they psychologically profile musicians, musician activists, and they can tell who could be best for a certain job, for example. So Kurt Cobain fit the bill to sell heroin to the population, I argue. He already had a massive stomach problem that was causing him, huge, horrible pains. He had dabbled in heroin about 6 to 10 times, according to his diaries that were just shown in that movie Montage of Heck that was on HBO on Cobain. And so, but he never used heroin regularly. He tried 6 to 10 times because he was in such massive stomach pain. Everyone knows paregoric, the common thing for stomach pain, has a tincture of opium in it. I used to work in a hospital, and opium was the best thing for intestinal pain. But so he never got really into it until he met Courtney Love. That's the first time he started using heroin daily, according to all his friends and his diaries, et cetera. And so she got him using it daily, and obviously the media, talks about it, and it's all of a sudden it's the thing to do. Heroin chic became in. Heroin use increased 10%, increased 10% a year every year from about 1992 to 1996. I have the statistics in my book, and I argue that people like Kurt Cobain using heroin helped promote that to young people, young impressionable people who loved Kurt Cobain and Nirvana. Now, Cobain actually found a cure to his stomach problems, and a year before he died, he found a cure to it. He said he was the happiest he's ever been because of that cure. He had the medication that worked for him, and a toxicology report from an incident in Rome where he went into a coma, if you might remember. That toxicology report. Yeah, that toxicology report has been, talked about in the press, and it showed no illegal drugs in the system at all. The only drug in the system, not even alcohol really, but whatever it was, there's no legal drugs in the system. I don't know about the alcohol situation because he might
basically
have
she tried to kill him there too,
The evidence points to that. The only thing that was in his system were roofies, Rohypnol. And that Rohypnol, it's legal in Europe. It's not legal in the United States, but it's legal in Europe. It was prescribed to Courtney Love because she was in London at the time, and it was prescribed to her for sleep because it is okay for sleep over there. But they were her prescription. There was tons of the roofies. Everyone knows that roofies, knock you out, not make you and leave you with no memory of what happened before you were knocked out. The date rape drug they call it. And so that's what caused his coma. And at that time, he was already divorcing Courtney Love, according to their lawyer, Rosemary Carroll. This detective, Tom Grant, actually has it on tape, that Rosemary Carroll saying, that he called her to, saying he wants to, divorce her, he wants to get her out of his will. They already had a prenuptial agreement. And Rosemary Carroll also says that Courtney Love called her, too, and said, find me the most vicious divorce lawyer possible. So, it's clear that Courtney Rowe had a part in Cobain's, murder. But I argue that she had already been doing operations for U.S. intelligence. And I detail what they all were before Kurt Cobain, but Kurt Cobain was one of her, obviously her biggest operation. And the thing is, I argue that she's dissociative. She's got a dissociative identity disorder. Her bandmate, Kristen Fast, says she was dissociative. Her biological father said she was dissociative. She's just, her abuse at a young age with the use of Tuinol and Seconal also has been shown to cause dissociative identity disorder. That's what MKUltra, one of their operations was about. Was to split young people's minds. When kids are before 7 years old, their minds can be split with heavy abuse and trauma. I counsel people with dissociative identity disorder who are abused, under the ages of 7, and they can have, developed that split personalities. And I argue that's what's going on with Courtney Love. and so she's not exactly an agent. She's like
She's a
a
victim.
messed up woman who's being manipulated herself. Though obviously she's a sick, ugly, and a sick woman doing horrible things, and that's
Well, her
what
daughter,
the story was.
she didn't name her daughter Bean or something. Courtney Bean.
Frances
or Bean?
Bean, yeah,
Frances
had
Bean.
filed a protective order against her. Yeah,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. At 15.
yeah.
She's. I don't know how old she is now.
Kurt's sister got custody of Frances Bean from Courtney Love when Frances Bean was, I think, about 16 or 17 years old, and then at about 19 years old, Frances Bean filed a protective order against her mother because saying her mother was dangerous and injurious, and already killed some of her pets, and needed to be kept away from her legally. So I think she's had a little of more of a peace agreement with her mother around this Montage of Heck movie. But at the same time, the new movie Soaked in Bleach coming out about Kurt Cobain shows massive evidence that Cobain was murdered, and that Courtney Love had played a part in it, and that Courtney, there's film on the movie, and that movie Soaked in Bleach is coming out June 11th in New York and L.A. and Pittsburgh and Seattle and movie theaters, and it's also coming out on Vimeo. You can get on Vimeo on June 11th. But
it's funny how she was promoted too for a short time, where she even won an Oscar portraying the girlfriend of
Larry Flint. Yeah.
Larry Flint, who was a heroin addict and died of AIDS.
Right.
And then she just had this burst, came on the scene out of nowhere, did a few movies, did that movie, got an Oscar, and then just disappeared.
Yeah, she was. Yeah, I mean, they wanted to promote her, obviously, in certain ways, and while she was promoting drugs in a huge way. I mean, she went on Barbara Waters and said something to the effect of, can't remember what exactly it was. It's something that my father wanted to produce a race, like super brilliant people, and so he gave me acid at a young age because he knew he could make me a genius by giving me acid. It was the strangest comment, but when you read it first, like, what in the world? Where the hell is that coming from? And but young people could believe it because Barbara Waters at that time, I think she had millions and millions of viewers watching her interview Courtney Love right after Kurt Cobain's death. And so here she is telling millions of young people that might be watching it, saying about acid can make you a genius or something. It's just bizarre, and it's actually the opposite of the truth because evidence shows, studies show that acid makes us a little less competent. I know it made me a little less competent in college, and I was glad to get away from acid. But at first, my grades dropped drastically, and I was like, "What's going on?" And thankfully, I stopped, eating acid and got away from it and got my grades back up. Eventually, it took about a year at least, though. And studies show that it causes some mild damage. But MK Ultra had agents, according to that same writer A.E. Hotchner, who wrote about the Rolling Stones, Ernest Hemingway's editor. He interviewed agents, MK Ultra agents. He said my job was to spread LSD, particularly to musicians. And Hotchner also said that Lashbrook, the assistant deputy director of the CIA, was in London helping get acid to musicians to promote LSD. And, so there's loads of evidence there that it was being done with LSD. I show the evidence that that same operation was most likely being done with heroin through people like Cobain and even people like John Lennon, because obviously he developed a heroin problem in the about 69 or 70 or so before he got clean and sober, and then of course
he kicked it, right? He was completely clean.
Yeah, he did kick it, and he was clean, but before he was I don't know if he was 100% clean in terms he might have smoked weed occasionally still, but he was basically clean and sober when he died, and show the evidence of how, a lawyer, longtime attorney and crime reporter for London Times named Fenton Bressler wrote an excellent book after a 7-year investigation called Who Killed John Lennon that says that the CIA, used Chapman to assassinate John Lennon. And there's some strange parallels actually between Courtney Love and this Chapman that I get into my book that I'm not going to get into now. But yeah, they did. I argue there's a pattern there of when these guys start sobering up and get more into activism, as Lenin was doing. He was getting more into activism at the end of his life. They're done away with, and the same thing happened. Was the pattern with Jimi Hendrix and Tupac Shakur. Now, Tupac Shakur was a lifetime activist, and that's is a whole other story to him. He was only pretending to be a gangster in order to appeal to gangs and politicize them, as part of his Black Panther extended family's plan to get the Bloods and Crips to call peace truces in L.A. and throughout the country and turn them on to left-wing activism. And that was happening, and Tupac was playing some part in helping that happen. And that's, why he was just misunderstood, Tupac, because he was, he grew up into a Black Panther family. He was head of a group called the New African Panthers, which was active in 8 cities nationwide by the time he was 17 years old. So he was already a black activist leader before he became a rapper. And so COINTELPRO was heavily on him from an early age. And they show evidence of about 5 assassination attempts before they actually killed him.
You there?
Yeah, you there, Mike? Yeah, I'm just ending with that for the moment. Yeah.
Do you think Suge Knight had something to do with the?
Yes.
Because I mean, every time something went down with Tupac, Suge Knight was always there and dodged every bullet. Yeah,
well, the situation with Knight is he was a low level. I argue that he was a low level collaborator. He was. When you look at the collaborators in the counterintelligence program, say, for example, with the assassination of Fred Hampton, who was head of the Chicago Black Panthers, you get an undercover infiltrator who had more and more serious crimes, and all of a sudden he, stops getting charged with crimes, and he's, it came out, the FBI documents basically came out about this undercover agent in the Chicago Black Panthers who helped set up Fred Hampton's murder, assassination, whatever. He, that guy had given a floor plan to the FBI. He was a low-level criminal. He said, you can be let off all these charges if you work for us. Basically, the FBI said to him, and so he did. He set up Fred Hampton's murder. He, gave them a floor plan. He drugged the drinks. He dropped, tranquilizers in the drinks of Fred Hampton and Mark Clark. And so when they just shot up Fred Hampton's home the night of killing Fred Hampton, they came in. Fred Hampton was basically unconscious in his bed. They shot him up in his bed, and they dragged him out to make it look like he was not in his bed when they shot him and killed him. So that's how drugs were used to assassinate Fred Hampton. Now, in the case of Suge Knight, he had increasing crimes and charges against him, and all of a sudden he keeps committing crimes, and there's no charges. But this all of a sudden came when, all of a sudden he goes from not being charged to developing this rap label. When he's, some say he was actually illiterate, Suge Knight. But either way, he develops this rap label, gets millions of dollars of backing out of nowhere, and and the real head of Death Row Records actually was a guy named Mike Kenner, who happened to be the lawyer for a guy named Michael Harry O'Harris, who was considered by Gary Webb. It was called in his book, Gary Webb's book, one of the 2 understudies of Freeway Ricky Ross. Freeway Ricky Ross, people might know, was working with CIA agents in getting cheap, crack cocaine from the Iran-Contra crack scandal situation that George Bush Sr. was running as vice president, and then, at the time under Reagan. So Death Row has all kinds of ties that way to U.S. intelligence, and Suge Knight was a low-level, collaborator in the U.S. intelligence operations that were being carried out in Death Row Records. Now, a high-level police detective who was investigating Death Row Records, happened to be a white guy, said he came across dozens of his fellow police officers in all levels of Death Row Records, and he didn't understand why. And when he asked his superiors, what are they doing there, his superior said, you can consider them troubleshooters or covert agents. And those were their words. And so they didn't know that this white guy would blow the whistle on this situation. But he did. They thought he'd be, down with them on what was going on. But he blew the whistle. His name is Russell Poole. He had held a press conference. He resigned from the force because they were making his life hell as he tried to come out with this information. So he resigned from the force. He held a press conference, and documentary filmmaker Nick Broomfield heard about the press conference and decided to make a movie about it, Biggie and Tupac, and featured Russell Poole in that documentary. And it tells a lot of information about what was going on in Death Row Records, including gun running, drug trafficking, along with the setup of Tupac's murder. And so, that's part of what was going on there. I could tell you more, but we only have about 5 or 10 minutes left, so I don't know if you have any other questions.
Oh, man, this is fascinating stuff. Fred Hampton, who's Fred Hampton?
Fred Hampton was in line to become the national chairman of the Black Panther Party.
Okay.
Just a brilliant guy. He died at 21 years old, and Noam Chomsky was so impressed with him. Professor Noam Chomsky was so impressed with Hampton that he actually flew out from Boston to Fred Hampton's Chicago funeral. He told me, Chomsky told me that he was like one of the only white guys in the whole place. But he's just an incredibly impressive Black Panther leader in Chicago. He was a great speech maker, brilliant young guy, and killed at 21. Now his son, Fred Hampton Jr., has grown to be a great activist and a great activist leader. He's got a group called the Prisoners of Conscience Committee. It's also been targeted, of course, but is still doing great work. And I've spoken with a number of times with Fred Hampton Jr. I've spoken in public events in Baltimore and talked to him a number of times in Chicago and other places.
Any word on, I think they called him Jay from Run DMC? I think it's called Master J. Master J, was it?
His name was Jam Master J, from Run
DMC. Any word on was there a reason why they killed him, or was that just a random thing?
Well, the Baltimore Sun said that he had become a serious, he'd become a political activist, a social activist by this time in his life. I mean, of course, Run DMC wasn't a social activist rap group when they first started. They did become very big. They were probably the first big rap, major popular rap group. And but over the years, Jam Master Jay started his own studio, became a social activist, they said, and people came into his studio. A gunman came into a studio despite the surveillance cameras. They somehow got in there and just shot him in the head, just killed him for seemingly no reason, and it was all caught on videotape. Then, similar to one of Tupac's shootings in New York before he died, like a second to last shooting of him. The police, were told, basically security people said, here's the video of the shooting. And in Tupac's case, they turned down the video and closed the case, didn't investigate it anymore in New York. In Jam Master Jay's case, they took the video and didn't do anything with it. Didn't say they had the video, didn't show any clips from it, just nothing happened thereafter. And then the press says it was probably an East Coast versus West Coast situation, which I argue was a somewhat manufactured murderous rivalry situation, as FBI documents said they used to use against the Black Panthers to cover up their own murders of both Black Panthers and political rappers.
Let me ask you this, because I'm a libertarian, okay? Mm-hmm. And because I get the fact that the CIA is shipping in the heroin and a lot of the drugs, yet there's a prison industrial complex in this country where they're just putting in droves and droves of people in jail for doing drugs or dealing drugs. I think that all drugs should be decriminalized. If you're caught with it, it should be just confiscated, and maybe you're given a ticket or some kind of fine, and maybe do community service. I really don't. I mean, where do you stand on that? What are your thoughts?
I don't have a strong stand on it either way. I basically, I'd rather it be decriminalized and treated as a health problem, but I don't have a particular stand on it, legal or not legal. I just can't say I have a strong stand on either way. I do think, though, that weed is used to criminalize lots of, young people and jail lots of young people, and I agree. Increase the prison industrial complex's profits and disenfranchise them, meaning give them charges and take away their ability to get jobs, take away their right to vote if they get felonies, things like that.
Right.
And so I see how they use it as a tool in that way, and I talk about that in one chapter of my book.
Because eventually you pass enough laws, everyone's a criminal.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
I'd like to
so.
see all drugs decriminalized, basically. And if you get caught with it, it's considered contraband. They just can't, like if they're caught with heroin or any kind of opiates, you just pay a fine or do community service. I want the jails, prison, just for rapists and murderers and violent criminals. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah. I mean, in some kind of perfect world, we wouldn't have jails. But I agree though that with drugs, I wish it was more of a treatment issue. I wish people, there is a lot of denial when it comes to addiction though. So I think people do need to be forced to get into recovery at times. But there's different ways that can be done, possibly besides just locking them up and throwing.
Well, look how far we've come with smoking. I remember when I was a kid, you could go into a Burger King or a McDonald's and there was those little tin ashtrays.
Right.
And you could smoke on a plane and smoke. Yeah, I mean, I'd be eating I'm a little kid and, everyone's smoking around you.
Right.
But now when people want to smoke, they automatically get up and go outside. They don't even ask if they could smoke in the house. Right. They'll just automatically get up and go outside. So, we've come a long way there,
I agree. Yeah, with weed, if it was completely legal and people had, could at any time they wanted put hot burning ashes down their lungs to make them stupider, then it might not be as appealing as it is now by making it illegal and associating it with people, as popular and brilliant as Tupac, and saying, Tupac smoked weed, so you should, it's obviously the cool thing to do.
Yeah.
Now, Tupac was actually getting away from weed at the end of his life, according to people, witnesses like Russell Simmons, the famous rap producer, who said he was at a party with Tupac in the last month of his life, and everybody was smoking and smoking weed and drinking all night, and Tupac didn't touch any alcohol or weed and was just dancing all night instead.
Wow.
And so he was actually settling down, getting married to Kadena Jones, Quincy Jones' daughter. They were planning to have a baby. He stopped going to strip clubs and things like that. They said he used to do when he was younger. And so he was really, changing at just 25 years old. But, that's, I think, part of the reason, because he was also getting away from Death Row Records. Yeah.
Well, hey, John, we're coming down to the wire here. Do you want to give your information, your book, your website, your email, or any information you have on how to get a hold of you?
Sure, thanks. Yeah, the book is Drugs as Weapons Against Us, the CIA's Murders Targeting STS, Panthers, Hendrix, Lennon, Cobain, Tupac, and other activists. You can find me on Facebook at John Potasch or John L. Potasch, either one, I guess. Basically, you can buy the book right now at Google Books, where you can actually have links to a lot of the sources on the internet. They come up instantly, either New York Times articles or videos of the sources saying what they say in my book and stuff like that. Or you can get it at Trine Day, my publisher's website, or you can get it at Amazon, of course. And Amazon, people have already gotten it at their door from Amazon, even though it says the publishing date on Amazon's May 30th. It's already been published. They already have it. They've already shipped it out to people.
Cool.
People have already gotten on their doorstep. Barnes & Noble, I don't know if they're shipping it yet or not, but they have it, and you could just go to Barnes & Noble and order it to their store if they don't have it in the store already, and you can see it first and preview it before you want to buy it. But so Books A Million and Barnes & Noble are supposed to both be carrying it, so you can get that way too in the conventional way. But support your independent bookstore if you can and order through them.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, listen, John, I want to thank you. This was a great interview. I'm really pleased. We're out of time, and I want to thank our audience. I want to thank the people in the chat room. I want to thank Cindy Jean-Pierre, my producer. And stay tuned. We're going to have a really good show next week, too. I'm Mike Ray. This is Parley, and we are out of here.
You are listening to WCJV Digital Broadcasting, Youngstown, New York.